Though you may have heard of Operation Valkyrie in Germany, during the Second World War there was a similar plot to take out Hideki Tojo, involving an imperial prince, a group of army figures, and a judoka so extreme that they called him Demon Ushijima. This is the story of the plot to kill Tojo, Japan's own Operation Valkyrie. Tojo had been in the military since 1905, being able to attend an officer's school on account of his family's aristocratic roots. From an early age he showed an aptitude for plotting and politicking, being involved in the Baden-Baden Secret Agreement, which sought to reform the Imperial Japanese Army and also remove the still lingering clan-based politics from military affairs. They succeeded in this, and Tojo succeeded in the subsequent battle between the radical Kodoha and the conservative Toseiha, which Tojo was a part of. Nicknamed Razor, Tojo was effective at getting rid of his enemies like Ishiwara Kanji, whom he forced into retirement. For a guy named Razor, he didn't seem to be too physically intimidating though. With the invasion of Manchuria in 1931, Tojo would become the leader of the Kempeitai, or military police of Japanese troops in Manchuria. When war with China began, he participated in massacres against civilians, but before long he was the vice minister and later full minister of war inside of the Konoe cabinet. Konoe Fumimaro had tried to wrangle Japanese political parties into a new political organization to rid the nation of the highly unpopular, partisan nature of Japanese politics and allow for total war planning like the Nazis, which is ironic considering that the Nazis really didn't do total war until 1944, but the Japanese were convinced that they did things more efficiently. Though Konoe's first attempt failed, his second succeeded, resulting in the Imperial Rule Assistance Association, Taisei Yokosankai, aka the IRAA. He was weak as leader, however, with Tojo lambasting Konoe for attempting to avoid war with the US. Tojo was the most radical of hawks and ignored research time and time again that stated that the US would overpower Japan if they went to war. On the 18th of October, 1941, Konoe resigned. Notable politician and Minister of the Interior, Kido Koichi, quickly suggested Tojo for the lead role to the Emperor, stating that even if war was avoided, he would be a good choice, and there were no other suitable candidates for the role. His influence had become far-reaching, and it made him hard to ignore. In spite of his background in politics, the Emperor ordered that he attempt to make nice with the US. This failed, obviously. Though he was aware of a plan to attack the US, he gave no orders to carry it out, so as not to violate the Imperial Order, but he didn't stop the attack, which is a very convenient way of getting around Imperial orders, I suppose you could say. The successes of the Malayan campaign, invasion of the Philippines, and so on had Tojo in a good mood. People were also fairly happy with him as a military leader, but Tojo proved to be overly authoritarian for some people's tastes. The IRAA in general was something that was controversial among certain conservative political circles and also those outside of the political orthodoxy of Japanese politics at the time. Any sort of radical changes that the IRAA suggested or proposed or promised simply never materialized outside of military preparedness programs. In order to expand his influence, Tojo ordered an election. All parties in Japan had either willingly joined the IRAA or forcibly dissolved, so the IRAA nominated politicians for people to vote for. However, a large number of figures ran unnominated, showing that anti-Tojo forces were still existent in Japan. One of the loudest of the anti-Tojo voices was Nakano Seigo, the former leader of the far-right Tohokai, who had begun to become concerned about ending the war quickly and generally criticizing Tojo's actions as prime minister. His criticism grew louder as the war began to turn against Japan. The Battle of the Coral Sea resulted in both sides claiming victory. This was the beginning of the gradual destruction of the Japanese fleet. The US was outproducing them, and the Japanese were increasingly unable to replace their losses. The following month, the Battle of Midway proved to be a major loss for Japan, crippling its fleet and cratering Japan's morale. The popularity that Tojo enjoyed was quickly drying up. Things had started to go really bad. Tojo had refused to requisition civilian shipping to resupply and aid Japanese troops on Guadalcanal, probably thinking that it was communist or something, and this got him into some serious hot water. Lieutenant General Tanaka Shinichi got in a fistfight over it with a government minister. When he met with Tojo the following day, he called Tojo a moron to his face, not fearing Tojo or his well-known history of secret police tactics to silence opponents. And as 1943 got worse and worse for the Japanese military, Tojo was about to silence another opponent, this time Nakano Seigo. After publishing an article critical of Tojo, Nakano was suddenly arrested by the Toko and held on a variety of charges. However, without any evidence, Nakano was kept captive under Tojo's orders. He was released 4 days later, but ended up committing harakiri after Kempeitai harassment. This was a long-running theme for Tojo. The political ally of Nakano, Ishiwara Kanji, who had led the invasion of Manchuria, had been forced into retirement by Tojo as a result of their political differences. In his retirement, Ishiwara ran the Toa Dome, or Asian League, a group dedicated to Pan-Asianism. Pan-Asianism was an ideology that had taken shape as a result of the increasing European encroachment in Asia, fearing that there were to be a new colonial frontier. The idea of uniting Asia to mitigate or remove Western influence entirely in the region began to spread around the turn of the century. Eventually, this became part of Japanese imperialist rhetoric, believing that since Japan was the strongest nation in Asia, the others should be led by Japan. Naturally, there were those, however, who took the idea of a united Asia against the whites seriously, the most notable being Ishiwara Kanji and his Asian League. Ishiwara Kanji conceived of a united Asia in a manner like the United States that would eventually destroy the whites in a final race war for the world. Yeah, really. So, Toa Dome had a large number of Korean and Chinese members, well, more than you'd expect. The most notable among them being Miao Pin, who had begun peace negotiations and hammered out a deal with Chiang Kai-shek, who could have accepted. However, the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs considered it inappropriate. And as angry as they all were at Tojo already, things were going to get even worse, and they would find something that everyone in Japan could be mad at. The Battle of Saipan, lasting from the 15th of June to the 9th of July of 1944, was hard fought by the Japanese, but in the end, they were incapable of holding out any longer. Tojo put the situation thusly in his orders to the commander there. Somehow I want you to defend Saipan to the last. If Saipan falls, I will be forced to leave my post as Prime Minister. Saipan fell, with most of its defenders fighting until death. The absolute national defense area of Japan was punctured, and was now in range of the long-range B-29 Superfortress bombers. This, and the Battle of the Philippine Sea, crippling the Japanese Navy, meant that now Japan had to admit that things were not going in their favor, and Tojo's government was in freefall. His refusal to immediately resign led to an increasing number of plots to get rid of him, some peaceful political plots, and others of a much more violent nature. Before Saipan had even fallen, a group of important politicians, led by Okada Keisuke and Konoe Fumimoto, began planning on removing Tojo. Tojo threatened Okada with imprisonment, but Okada wasn't intimidated. In response, Tojo began to plan to refurnish his political strength with a shuffle of his cabinet, but this wasn't in the cards. His former friend, Kishi Nobusuke, had become an enemy of him. As part of a plot with the statesman, Kishi refused to resign and demanded that the cabinet resign as a whole, as the back then Japanese prime ministers lacked the ability to change cabinet ministers at will. Despite being threatened with the sword, Kishi held firm. Tojo would continue to struggle to stay afloat, reaching out to Yonai Mitsumasu and ally secretly turned enemy Kido Koichi. He attempted to even garner sympathy with the emperor himself, asking for an order to continue his political regime. However, this was not given by the emperor. Also in development was an assassination plot by Prince Nobuhito Takamatsu and Hosokawa Morisada. In general, everyone wanted Tojo removed from office one way or another. Meanwhile, at the Imperial General Headquarters Staff Office Department, a major in the IJA named Tsunoda Tomoshige came across some classified files and read them. These secret files revealed the extent of the recent defeats and the general negative tenor of the war, as if that was not already immediately obvious. He was shocked by this and confided in his friend, famous judo practitioner Ushijima Tatsukuma, aka Demon Ushijima. Ushijima had gotten his reputation and nickname for his wild fighting style and extreme training regimen. Every morning he would pull a 130-pound roller behind him, and at night he would do weightlifting with rocks, in the nude. Before each match, he would drink the blood of a Chinese soft-shell turtle, and just before each match he would stuff his mouth with powdered bamushi, a highly venomous pit viper native to Japan. Upon entering the ring, he would swallow the powder and then begin his unending series of savage attacks that characterized his style. He was just built different. During the early 30s, he was by far the strongest judoka in the world. However, by 1934, he'd gotten a parasitic infection in the lead up to an important tournament match that the emperor was to attend. He quickly lost almost 20 pounds and struggled to walk. In an attempt to restore his strength, he stayed in a cave. There, he meditated and recited the Book of the Five Rings for about a month. In the end, he lost, and as he often said, defeat and death have the same meaning, which led him to retire and take up training instead. training a number of important judo figures, the most notable being Kimura Masahiko, notable for defeating Heiyo Gracie and losing to Riki Dozan. After leaving active competition, Ushijima began to involve himself in politics, joining Ishiwara Kanji's Asian League. Ushijima and Tsunoda had been pretty disturbed by the state of the war and Tojo's leadership, so the pair began to develop a plan to collapse the cabinet. And what better way to do that than killing the Prime Minister? Tsunoda wrote the Observations Regarding the Greater East Asian War, which was a policy proposal of sorts, laying out the horrible situation of the war and arguing to make peace immediately. During the plot, the specifics of which were still evolving, it was to be handed off to the Emperor via one of the imperial princes. But the pair were not capable of acting on their own. They went to Yamagata Prefecture to visit the retired Ishiwara Kanji. Since 1939, he'd entered the Army Reserve and was effectively retired from public life, occasionally engaging in political organizing on a limited level. Ishiwara read the recommendation Tsunoda wrote and asked for a night to think on it. On the margins, he wrote, "If you are unable to stop the emergency measures, then kill Tojo." But the following day he would change his mind in conversation, writing, "Killing is approved." Ishiwara had finally lost his patience with Tojo and saw that moment as his chance to get revenge against his old rival. Having gotten Ishiwara's assent, the pair returned to Tokyo in high spirits and discussed ways of assassinating Tojo. The IJA's gas school at Nadashino in Chiba had a secretly developed chemical gas weapon known as chabin, or teapot. This was prussic acid gas, the same ingredient in Zyklon B. The pair were likely unaware of this, but the weapon was exceptionally potent, and likely would have taken out a number of bystanders, including the assailant themselves. The plan was as follows. While Tojo was driving to meet the Emperor in an open-topped car, never a smart idea, overtop the Seimon Ishibashi Bridge, Demon Ushijima would sit in a pine tree at the approach of the bridge and throw the bomb into the car like some sort of an angry gorilla in a zoo. Yes, really, it was that simple. As part of the plan, the recommendation document was to be handed off to an imperial prince, who would then hand that, subsequently, to the emperor. The prince chosen was Prince Takahito. This makes two younger brothers of the emperor involved in plots to assassinate Tojo, and Hirohito refused to give Tojo any support as the walls closed in. The final brother, Prince Chichibu, was actively dying from tuberculosis at the time. Not exactly a great time to be Tojo. The plan had been set, the document given to Prince Takahito, the chabin had been acquired, the date of attack had been decided. However, there was a bit of a snag. Prince Takahito liked the idea of removing Tojo, but not assassinating him. Somehow, Takahito told the Empress Dowager Teimei about the document and the plot, leading to the pair to report the plotters to the Kempeitai. Tsunoda and Demon Ushijima were quickly arrested. Both of them were to be tried in a court-martial with stiff sentencing expected. However, Tojo had resigned by the time the trial took place in March of 1945. Thus, Tsunoda was simply discharged from the military, given 5 years of imprisonment with a 2-year suspended sentence which resulted in his immediate release. Ushijima was let off without a trial and was never prosecuted. Ishiwara was let off after an apology to the court-martial. That's how much everyone hated Tojo by that point. Ironically, Tojo would resign on the 18th of July, the same day that the assassination was set to occur. Tojo was followed by Kuniaki Koiso, and then Suzuki Kantaro as Prime Minister. Throughout the ending stages of the war, Tojo remained optimistic about Japan's chances, but had little influence on the government. Before he could be arrested by the US occupation forces, Tojo tried and failed to kill himself. Ultimately, he would be executed by the US. Ishiwara Kanji was frequently called in as a witness during the international tribunals, but he was never charged with any crimes, likely because of his opposition to pretty much everything Japan did after the 1930s. He was plagued with sickness in the later half of the 1940s and died in 1949. Tsunoda became the managing director of the Japan Science Foundation and helped create TV Tokyo in the early 1960s. He died in the 1980s. Demon Ushijima suffered a lot during the occupation. The US banned martial arts for the time being, and Ushijima was left to wax nostalgically about the old days. His former student, Kimura Masahiko, would climb to farther heights than he, fighting in the new and more commercial world of pro wrestling and professional contact sports. Ushijima would remain true to the old way. He would largely work as a judo instructor for the rest of his life, and beat the crap out of people way into his 60s and 70s because he was just built different, like I said. He died in 1985. And Emperor Hirohito went to Disneyland, so all's well that ends well, right folks? If you like this video, please leave a like and maybe share it with somebody else who might enjoy it. If you have any comments, feel free to leave one down below. If you like my content a lot, you could also donate via Ko-fi or join my Patreon. Thank you for your consideration. Also, I recently got a new computer and I'm trying to implement a slightly new style in my videos to make them a tad faster to produce and a bit more fun to watch, so expect more videos more often. Hopefully, if things work out. We'll have to see. Also, check out my Twitch. I usually stream on Wednesdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and sometimes Sundays, starting at around 2 PM EST. Without further ado, check out this video. It's pretty good. Good stories only. Thank you.